Good morning to all of you. You are welcome in this class. And today we are going to discuss three main subjects. First is history of soil fertility. Number two, history of fertilizers. And number
Not audible, sir.
Sir,
Not
you're
audible,
not audible.
sir.
Why is not coming?
Thank you.
Microphone.
Thank you. Thank you. So, friends, you are welcome in this class. And today we are going to have three subjects in this lecture. I will try to finish everything in by before 12. And first part will be history of soil fertility, then history of fertilizers, and third will be organic plant nutrition. So these are the three subjects, and maybe I will take 20 minutes for each, 25 minutes for each, and then we'll discuss about practical tomorrow. And so far history of soil fertility is concerned, if you go to any subject, first of all we know history, how the things progressed, because we learn from history. Lot of things are simplified. They are presented in a very simple way, how people thought about the things in the beginning and how the advances in a particular subject have happened. So history of soil fertility is very big subject. It is not a very small subject. So because the areas of soil fertility are so many areas, soil fertility, plant nutrition cannot be separated from fertility now. So far history is concerned, it is very difficult to divide a line between soil fertility and plant nutrition. So far history is concerned. So in this case, for example, you have organic matter. The history may be different for organic matter. Essential plant nutrients, availability of nutrients, different sources people have tried. Similarly, if you go to the laboratory, different methods have been developed to analyze the nutrient in the soil or in the plant, in the water, in the fertilizer, and also organic and mineral forms of nutrients. They also got history. Essentiality of nutrients also has history. Methodology for estimation of available nutrient status, study of interactions of nutrients, so many aspects. The whole soil science, whole plant nutrition subject is full of history. So it is not easy to cover the history in detail. So I'll just take up the important points. So friends, normally we call BC and AD. So BC is also called as before common era. BCE means before common era, and BC, they are the same. BC or BCE, you can call it. BC means before Christ. They got same meaning. And CE or AD, they are same. CD means common era. It is also known as AD. So AD1 means CE1 or 1 CE. AD means Anno Domino. The letter means in the year of the Lord, often translated as in the year of our Lord. That is the meaning. This is just to make a distinction between BC and AD. Because in history we use these dates these years very frequently. So in ancient times, since the very beginning, human beings settled near the rivers. And why they settled near the rivers? Because water was available. Water was the main driving factor. Human civilization settled near the rivers. And also the land near the rivers was also fertile. So because of these two reasons, people settled near the river. Most of the civilizations happened near the rivers. So human interest in soil fertility is very, very old. And in this case, you can see that importance in supporting crop production go back to 5,000 to 5,500 years in soil fertility, human interest. So manuring as a part of crop husbandry in ancient India is mentioned in our Vedas, Upanishad. So this is very old subjects, soil fertility. And in Indus Valley civilization, which was somewhere around 3000 to 1300 BCE, some people say it was 3000 to 1500 BCE. And also after that, you got Alexander Great, who lived from 356 to 323 BCE. So during all this period, they were interested in soil fertility, people, and account in Western countries dates back to 2500 BC. So mentions have been made about the use of manures from animals, other sources. Beneficial effects of legumes were also recognized during that period. And manuring of vineyards mentioned during 900 to 700 BC in European countries. And now we start with Aristotle. He was a great philosopher and he had his ideas about soil fertility or soils. So he could not do any experiment, but it was just his thoughts. He said, since plants grow from the soil, therefore they must take their substance or their food from the soil. He was of the view. Very rough idea, but very true also, you see, philosophical style. And as many flavors are there in the flesh of different fruits, so many it is plain, it is clear, prevail also in the earth. Very, very good idea, you see. He means that the soil will affect the quality of the produce. The message is soil will affect the quality of the produce, or rather composition of the produce. If you have different composition, sufficient nutrients in the soil, you will get different flavor or different taste or different quality. So as many flavors are there in the flesh of different fruits, so many it is plain prevail also in the earth. So, and it is true also. These days also you can see that your soils develop, different kind of soil developed in different kind of climate. Climate includes mainly your temperature and rainfall. So temperature and rainfall plus parent material will decide that what kind of soils are going to be developed. This particularly rainfall can change the soil type also. So, and then the soil type will decide that which plant will grow. All plants cannot grow in one kind of soil. Certain plants love to grow in acidic, slightly acidic soil. Certain plants love to go in different alkaline soil, and their quality and yield will be affected by the kind of soil. So we can extend this idea of Aristotle to further. And he regarded soil as equivalent to a vast stomach. He treated soil as a stomach that prepares and supplies the food to the plant. I think he was very much right. You see, we add organic matter, organic materials into the soil. They are decomposed. Decomposed means they are digested and then they are taken up by the plant. So soil is preparing food for the plant. It was a good idea. And later on, subsequently, after many, many years, humus theory of plant nutrition came. So in this humus theory, I think most of you know that it was proposed by Albrecht Thayer in 1809, and it is a beneficial use of plant and animal manures, because he was of the idea that these plant and animal manures were actually derived from the soil, and when you put them back, they are taken by the plant. So plants feed upon substances which are similar to them. Humus was regarded as the chief nutrient for the plants, taken up by roots and converted into the plant material. So they said that humus is directly taken up by the plant. And they did not recognize the elemental nature of the nutrients, that they are removed in ionic forms. Theophrastus, he was disciple of Aristotle. I think some of you might be knowing Theophrastus. He advocated that thin soils be manured heavily but rich soils manured sparingly. It is just kind of precision nutrient management, you see. In those days, he discovered precision nutrient management. Means if your soil are fertile, apply less manure. If your soil are less fertile, apply more manure. Similarly, Theophrastus and also Virgil were aware of the benefit of green manuring, and they suggested that growing of leguminous crops is beneficial to the soil. Pliny suggested soil should be limed, and effect of one application lasted for several years. And both Theophrastus and Pliny were familiar with the saltpeter. It is potassium nitrate. Olive orchards and other gardens were enriched by sewage in Europe, in Italy, and it was sold to the farmer in those days. And Palissy in 1563, he said that when you bring dung into the field, it is to return to the soil something that has been taken away. Means you have taken some food from the soil and you should bring back that food to the soil, which is good for the plant. So then systematic, these were rough ideas in the ancient times. People do not have much of the scientific basis. Based upon their experience, they had ideas, but general ideas about soil fertility. Now systematic or scientific investigation were started in 16th century and with the experimental support, with the experimental evidences. For example, water was the principal nourishment for plants, said by Francis Bacon. Then water was the sole plant nutrient by Helmont. Potassium nitrate saltpeter was the principle of vegetation and this was the major source of soil fertility. So idea started emerging in the 16th century and then terrestrial matter rather than water was the principle of vegetation. Means people were trying that what is actually food of plant and how these plants are made up of. What thing is constituting the plant? So somebody thought that it is water, somebody said carbon dioxide, somebody said it is just soil, somebody said combination of two or more. So these ideas started. So plant roots actually ingested soil particles. This was another view by Jethro Tull. He said the finer the soil, these minute particles can be directly absorbed by the soil. A fallow field absorbs the fertilizing property of the atmosphere. This was very significant point, that the fertilizing properties of the soil may come from the atmosphere. Maybe indirectly it may be related to rhizobium action, or it may be related to your acid rain or some deposition from the atmosphere. Because you know, in those days and even today, farmers do this practice. They keep their land fallow during a certain period of time and they assume that it will get more fertility from the atmosphere, maybe through the rainfall, maybe through the other kind of atmospheric deposition, the soil fertility can improve. So this was the idea from Thayer in 1810. Then views on soil fertility and crop nutrition started changing with Bossingard. Genuinely scientific research was done by him. And I think he proved that carbon, hydrogen, oxygen are necessary for plant, essential for plant. So carbon in the plant was derived from the air and that soil provided only a small part of total plant food. I think he is fully right even today. Though this small part was indispensable, supplying nitrogen and the constituent contained in ash, means minerals. Ash is contained of minerals, mineral nutrients, and rest is your carbon, mainly carbon or hydrogen or oxygen. In contrast, Humphrey and Thayer, they were of the opinion of humus theory. They said that plant take up nutrients in organic forms, in humus form from the soil. But it was not agreed by Justus von Liebig. He demolished the humus theory. Justus von Liebig, you know about him. So as yesterday I told you that he is considered as father of agriculture chemistry. So in modern soil fertility or plant nutrition, his contributions are immense. And I already discussed about the role of Liebig in soil chemistry or soil fertility in detail. These points were already covered. The contributions of Liebig in particularly law of minimum, you can see in detail. And this has been explained to you, law of minimum. And this slide is important for you because it is said that Liebig also lifted ideas from Sprengel, you know. Sprengel was the first to propose the law of minimum. It has been found later. So what Sprengel, he proposed this law in 1828. You see, Liebig came into picture in 1840. And this statement by Sprengel is already given in the research paper. It is already mentioned much before the Liebig. So it was kind of, you know, scientific plagiarism done by Liebig. So maybe, or otherwise he may not be knowing about it actually. It is also possible that he was not knowing about it. So Sprengel said that it is indisputable that when a plant needs 12 substances, suppose 12 factors are there, substances to develop, It will not grow if any of these is missing. If any of these is missing, and it will always grow poorly when one of these is not available in sufficiently large amount as required by the nature of the plant. So this is, what is it? It is law of minimum. So it has therefore been suggested by some scientists that this law of minimum should be called as Spengel-Liebig law of minimum. So then long-term fertilizer experiments were established in the world. In many countries, you have long-term manural trials. In some countries, they are called as long-term manural trials, and in some countries, they are called as long-term fertilizer experiment. So you can see Rothamsted in 1843, this center was established where they started long-term fertilizer experiments, and Lewis and Gilbert. Lewis was a businessman and Gilbert was a scientist. They collaborated because Lewis was interested in production of superphosphate, single superphosphate, so that he could do some business. So he wanted to see the effect of manures and fertilizers, particularly SSP, in long term, what it does to soil fertility. So therefore, they started this experiment, and oldest rotational experiment on crop rotations were in Morrow plots in Illinois, 1879, and extensive field experiment in Pennsylvania, 1882, and long-term manual experiment at Kanpur in India started in 1885. These were the major initiative in obtaining a deeper understanding. So far long-term experiment in India is concerned, you will get a lecture from someone on this aspect. This is a picture from Broadbach experiment, and you can see in the background, it is the long-term fertilizer experiment in the Rothamsted, which is located in Harpenden. It is just 40 kilometers away from the London. So you can see they are keeping the archives of plant as well as archives of soil. Means long-term storage of plant and soil sample. Because who knows, after 10 years, 20 years, somebody will require 40 years old plant sample or soil samples. So they are archived very well, these soil and plant samples in Rothamsted experiment. And you can see this is the plot where they have not applied any fertilizer. This is control plot. So you can see the growth. Growth is very slow, but still some plants are growing. You can count the number of years, how many years have lost or have completed. So this is the situation. And this is another treatment where you can see some better growth. I don't know what is that. Maybe they use potassium, magnesium, or some other nutrients in this. So Bossingard, as already discussed, also said that crop rotations with legume removed more nitrogen than what was applied. So that means that some nitrogen was coming from outside. He just gave this idea, fantastic idea. Means they removed more nitrogen what was applied to them or supplied to them. So it gave some hint that why legumes are important. So then Hellriegel and Wilford discovered that legumes do fix atmospheric nitrogen by certain bacteria living on roots. He could not isolate, but he told that there are bacteria that fix atmospheric nitrogen. They gave very good clue. And then the organism was later isolated by Beijerinck, and who named them Bacillus redissicola. The early name of rhizobium was Bacillus redissicola. And Beijerinck also isolated, not isolated, he also isolated from soil the nitrogen fixing bacteria, Azotobacter in 1901 and Azospilum in 1925. So now coming to the India, and I have already given you detailed notes about history of soil fertility, nutrition and fertilizers. Last night, I think you received all those presentations. So those who are interested in detail can see them. I also provided you some notes where you got 95 or 96 pages. So the first, at the start, you will find some history of soil fertility. So now let us move to India. What happened in India during all these years? So we'll cover the main highlights. In India, soil fertility as a discipline was born in 1882 under the umbrella of agricultural chemistry, when J.W. Leather was appointed as the first scientific staff of then Imperial Department of Agriculture at Dehradun. He was later moved to the Imperial Institute of Agriculture Research at Pusa, Bihar. Now it is IRA, you know it, as an imperial agricultural chemist. So in India, the early phases of soil fertility research have been documented by Randhawa and Tandon. Books are available, Tandon and Pratap Naran. Based on the results of about 5,000 manual trials, Burns concluded that Indian soils needed only nitrogen application. In 1933, it was suggested that Indian soils are definitely deficient in nitrogen and they need nitrogen application. But later on, after say 15, 16 years, Stewart came into the picture. He did some work in India and he said it is not just nitrogen. Now you need to add phosphorus also. He said you need to add phosphorus also. Applying nitrogen alone is not enough now. And Indian soils are getting deficient in phosphorus also. So several of the following points he made means suggestions by Stewart. Stewart said that the Indian soils are generally poor in nitrogen and different forms of nitrogen are nearly equally effective. Means ammonical form, nitrate form, amide form, all are equally effective. He said that Egyptian clover and wheat in parts of Punjab and crops in red sandy soils responded to P, means they required phosphorus application, and laterite soils responded to K, but responses to K in the presence of adequate amount of other nutrients have not been studied. Trace element deficiencies may be fairly widespread, means micronutrient deficiency may be there at that time. Soil test plant response correlation had not been adequately studied. So this is how the subject started in India. In the early and mid 50s, two developments played a major role in soil fertility evaluation and determination of research-based fertilizer application rates. These were initiation of simple fertilizer trials on farmers' field and setting up of 24 soil testing labs with American assistance in India. And the network of soil testing labs has expanded over the years to more than 1,000 labs at present. You can count, you can get the latest information. This is 7-year-old information. The simple fertilizer trials were initiated in 1953 as a follow-up action of Stewart's report. These trials laid the foundation of the ICR's All India Coordinated Agronomic Research Project, now a part of Indian Institute of Farming System Research. The institute is generating multi-location information of INM and organic farming. So this institute have several centers, maybe 18 or 20 centers, who are developing INM packages for conventional farming as well as for organic farming. Soil fertility research in India expanded and became more diversified after reorganization of ICR. So several projects have come up. All India Coordinated Project on micronutrients, on pollutants, and so many projects are there and handled by Indian Institute of Soil Science, Bhopal. So, and these experiments in India have concluded. We also had discussion before also. So these are the results of long-term fertilizer experiment in India, that continuous application of only nitrogen in the least is the least desired practice. Means you do not apply nitrogen instead of applying too much of nitrogen. That will be better. Not applying nitrogen will be better than applying too much of nitrogen only. And in several cases, plots receiving continuous N application produced even lower crop yields than the unfertilized control, which was continuously unfertilized control. So physical, chemical, and biological soil properties were most favored by application of optimum fertilizer rate plus FYM, means over and above the optimum recommended dose of fertilizer. If you apply 10 to 15 tons of FYM, you get better soil physical, chemical, and biological properties. Balanced fertilizer use augmented by liming in acid soils. In somewhere they were deficient in sulfur, micronutrients. If you use balanced fertilization, you get long-term improvement in soil fertility and productivity. So this finishes one part. So if you have any question, any point of discussion at this point of time, you are welcome. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, is it okay?
Sir. Yes, sir.
So we move to next presentation.
Okay, sir.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Just in brief, I'll go in brief. Now, in brief, history of fertilizers, and I want to know from you what is salt index and how it is related to fertilizer salt index. One of you can come forward and tell me salt index. If you know it,
Sir,
please
it is
tell me. Yeah.
Sir, it is the osmotic pressure created by a fertilizer with respect to sodium nitrate.
Very good. Excellent. So I think others might have got it. Salt index is very, very important in case of fertilizers because many times the seedlings or germinating seed get damaged due to fertilizer application. So it is important to understand salt index in the beginning. So you see what is salt index is very directly defined it. That salt index is a measure of the salt concentration that fertilizer induces in the soil solution. How much it is inducing in the soil solution, salt concentration, or releasing salts into the soil solution. So placement of some formulation near seed decrease the seed germination or it can cause seedling injury. So just we can understand salt index, ratio of increase in osmotic pressure of the salt solution produced by a specific fertilizer to the osmotic pressure of the same weight of sodium nitrate. He explained it very correctly, which is based on a relative value of 100. So you take case of sodium nitrate, it is standard, which you consider as 100. And with respect to this, you can see the salt value of others. So sodium nitrate was chosen as the standard because it was 100% water soluble and a commonly used N fertilizer in those days, and when the SI concept was first proposed in 1943. The salt index concept was first time proposed in 1943. So N and K materials of commonly used fertilizer have higher salt index values than those of P material. These N and K materials have more salt index than the phosphatic materials because phosphatic may produce more acids. The salt index of a mixed formulation containing NPK is the sum of salt index value of its components. Means you will calculate for N, P and K differently and make the total of it. Although the total salt index for a high analysis NPK mixture may be greater than that for a slow analysis NPK mixture. The salt index per unit of plant nutrients may be lower in the high analysis product. So this is important part. Suppose you have 19, 19, 19 NPK and in another case you have 777. So I would prefer the higher concentration product because it per unit nutrient, it will leave less salt index. It will give you less salt index value. Then history of fertilizer in very brief, just 10 minutes, I will finish it. Sodium nitrate or Chilean nitrate is the first natural mineral and the only natural source of nitrate nitrogen. It is the only natural source of nitrate nitrogen. Found in North Chile, named as Chilean nitrate. It is also named as Chilean nitrate. At present, it is a fertilizer of a small and localized value, and it is not of much in use, and it is just used as a standard for salt index. Just we have seen the sodium nitrate. Birth of superphosphates. The superphosphates were the first fertilizer in the world, and also in India, single superphosphate was the first fertilizer. Crushed bones used as a phosphatic fertilizer. Liebig treated powdered bones with sulfuric acid and found that to be more effective than untreated bones. Means it solubilized the phosphorus. Historically, there were four main players in the development of phosphatic fertilizers. They were Liebig of Germany, Lewis and Henslow of UK, and Murray of Ireland. They were three important players in three different countries so far superphosphate is concerned. In India also, we imported superphos from UK. First time, it came to Mumbai and nobody was interested to buy it. And then the Punjab farmer could know that there is some new fertilizer which is lying unsold in Mumbai. And they asked for it and it was supplied to Punjab. And then the farmer started using phosphatic fertilizer in India. So Punjab was perhaps the first state to start using phosphatic fertilizer in the country. So you can see John Bennett Lewis, he is associated with Rothamsted experiments, was the first person to manufacture a fertilizer in the case of SSP, monocalcium phosphate with gypsum. It was mixture of gypsum and monocalcium phosphate. He took out a patent in 1842 for treating mineral phosphate with sulfuric acid. However, James Murray of Ireland was the first one who produced a fertilizer in 1808, many years ahead of Lewis. His process was based on the acidulation of phosphorite, a rock consisting chiefly of calcium phosphate, with sulfuric acid. So later Lewis purchased Murray's patent and amended it. And first superphosphate plant complete with sulfuric acid production facility was built in 1854 by Packard at Ipswich, England. In India, SSP was also the first fertilizer to be manufactured in 1906 at Ranipet in Tamil Nadu. Now, basic slag is also an important product. You can see its history. You can read yourself from this point. Similarly, ammonia synthesis was very, very important. If you do not have ammonia, it is difficult to make nitrogenous fertilizer. So ammonia gas was first produced by J. Priestley in 1754 by distilling ammonium chloride with quicklime. He was the first to produce ammonia gas. Although ammonium sulfate arrived on the scene in the later half of the 19th century as a byproduct of the coke oven industry. However, large-scale synthesis of ammonia, Haber and Bosch process, it was for the commercial production of ammonia, and they received Nobel Prize also. And Bosch said that they have done about 20,000 experiments to find out the catalyst for the synthesis of ammonia from nitrogen and hydrogen. So this was definitely a very breakthrough kind of research in fertilizer industry, for fertilizer industry. So urea, history of urea is very small here. You can see first it was separated from urine by Rowley in 1773. Hence the name urea, because it came from urine. Therefore, name was urea. In 1782, Prout separated pure crystalline urea. It was first synthesized by Frederick Wöhler of Germany in 1828 by heating ammonium cyanide. So this is history of undressed use of urea. Commercial production of urea had to wait until 1922 after the large-scale synthesis of ammonia was made possible by Haber and Bosch. The IG Farbenindustrie, this is German word, in Germany was the first company to synthesize urea commercially from ammonium carbamate in 1920. In India, the first urea plant was set up in 1959 at Sindri in Bihar. Ammonium sulfate actually preceded SSP as the first synthetically produced fertilizer. It was first as a byproduct of the manufacture of coal gas in 1815 in England, and later from coke oven battery gas. Now it is produced in very small quantities in India now. Anhydrous ammonia, it is mostly produced in US and some other developed countries, and I think this is the cheapest source of nitrogen. If you have machine to applied anhydrous ammonia, because you make liquid ammonia from the gas by high pressure. High pressure, you need some storing containers that can tolerate this high pressure. So in India, it is not possible to have that kind of machines. But US people, they are directly injecting this liquid ammonia, anhydrous ammonia into the plant roots. So it is being practiced. In India, it has very little significance. And then calcium cyanamide was synthesized by Frank and Caro in Germany. So it is not of much use, this fertilizer, calcium cyanamide. But sometimes it is used as a slow nitrogen release fertilizer. And then ammonium nitrate, and production started in Europe. It is even cheaper than urea, actually cheaper than urea. But since it is used by people as explosive material, so it is not commonly sold freely in the market. So restricted sale is there and restricted use is there. But in Europe and some developed countries, they are using it safely by licensing it and taking care of the things. And then to overcome this problem of explosiveness, this ammonium nitrate can be mixed with calcium carbonate to produce this calcium ammonium nitrate. So it contains about 20 to 26% nitrogen. Calcium ammonium nitrate contains 20 to 26% nitrogen. And then sulfur-based fertilizer, I think you know the elemental sulfur is used, gypsum is used as a source of sulfur, and elemental sulfur is being sold as bentonite sulfur, containing 90% of sulfur in elemental form. And elemental sulfur is historically known as brimstone. Brimstone, it can be mined material or recovered from sour oil and gas. Phosphate rock, Morocco is the country which produces largest quantity of rock phosphate, and China and Russia and US, they have sizable reserves of rock phosphate. In India, rock phosphate is very limited in Jamarkota near Udaipur in Rajasthan, and maybe in a small quantity in other places also. So rock phosphate is definitely a basic material for manufacturing any kind of phosphatic fertilizer. Potassic fertilizer have also history, and potassium chloride or muriate of potash was the first potash fertilizer to be produced from mined material in Germany. And most of the potash we are importing and marketing in India. We do not have any reserve of potassium as natural minerals. And NPK fertilizer are being produced by people now. You find in the market, large marketing is happening with NPK complex fertilizers. Farmers are using them and they are being encouraged for balanced fertilization. The only problem with NPK fertilizer is that the farmers are illiterate. So that way they can use more of phosphorus and potash than nitrogen. So they need to understand the calculations so that they can apply the balanced quantities. Otherwise, it will favor more application of P and K rather than nitrogen. So you can see there are different grades of NPK fertilizer which are available in India. At least name of 2-3 grades you can remember. Sometimes you can be asked, tell us the grade of NPK fertilizer. So for example, 12-32-16, it is the most common NPK fertilizer. 12-32-16, farmers know it. They call 12-32-16. They don't know NPK. And also 10-26-26 and 19-19-19 is also common. And your 17-17-17, etc. These are NPK fertilizers. And just to introduce you, I want to tell something about fertilizer control order. This is a government order, government book book of rules that governs the release of any new fertilizer material. If you want to market a fertilizer product, that product should be registered, or that product should be registered with fertilizer control order. It will decide whether a product can be marketed or can be sold in India or not. And the standard and composition of that particular material is written in fertilizer control order. So it is kind of licensing system by the government. And you can say this fertilizer control order is the document was contributed by Fertilizer Association of India, and it has 315 pages. So for example, if you say that the urea contains 46% nitrogen, so it is written in this document. If a manufacturer or if a salesman, if a retailer is selling urea which contains less than 46% nitrogen, he will be caught by the law enforcing agencies, and he can be punished also. So this is how this fertilizer control order, in which a specification of all the products are laid down, and also the methods for analysis of fertilizer nutrients are also mentioned in this fertilizer control order. For example, if you have urea or SSP or any fertilizer, and you want to estimate nutrient, maybe nitrogen, maybe zinc, maybe phosphorus, so methods are also prescribed, that these are the methods which will be used to test the nutrient composition of a fertilizer material. So it is just like you have insecticide act, and based upon that certain specifications are there for insecticide, and law enforcing agencies are also there. So is the case with the fertilizer, so that farmers could not be cheated, or the consumer or user who is buying fertilizer material should not be fooled. He should get the genuine material. Also, this is kind of enforcement from the government. So you can find a copy of fertilizer control order, and it is being amended from time to time, and new products are included. New products, for example, a few years back there was neem coated urea in 2016. Neem coated urea was made mandatory, So the composition or specification of neem coated urea are given in the fertilizer control order, that it should contain so much of 350 ppm of neem oil, or 46% of nitrogen minimum, not more than so percent of burate, and so on, moisture, this and that. So grain size, so all these are specifications are laid down in the fertilizer control order. Similarly, zincated urea is also included, where they say minimum 2% zinc or zinc sulfate. I don't remember. Maybe zinc or zinc sulfate may be there. So you can check it. So, so micronutrients are also there. Zinc sulfate, all the sulfates are used for micronutrients, and they are there in the fertilizer control order. Specifications are laid down, and one can make the mixture of micronutrients also, but that authority is given only to the state governments. They are not mentioned in fertilizer control order. Only state government can give you order to mix micronutrients, to make the combination of micronutrients. Similarly, some specialty fertilizers are also there. In recent year, you got greenhouse cultivation of vegetables and high value crops under protective cultivations, where you use this drip irrigation system, or somewhere sprinkler irrigation system. So in that case, you need some special kind of fertilizers which are 100% water soluble, and which are not leaving any salt, because the pipelines will be clogged if your fertilizer material is leaving certain salts. So that way means it should be salt free, and such kind of fertilizer are specialty fertilizers. They are coming up in the market. And fortified fertilizers means you are adding certain micronutrients into NPK fertilizers. So for example, SSP fortified with boron. Boronated SSP is also listed in fertilizer control order. Zincated urea is also there, means urea plus zinc sulfate or zinc oxide. In recent years, complexes such as DAP is having 0.3% boron, 0.5%. So variety of combinations are there. They are known as fortified fertilizer, where N, P or K fertilizers have micronutrients. Fortified fertilizer. And not only this, we are talking about slow release fertilizer and control release fertilizers. So there are variety of slow release fertilizers, particularly in case of nitrogen. Nitrogenous fertilizers are made slow release by different methods, by adding, sometimes by adding certain constituent which decrease the solubility. They decrease the solubility of urea or nitrogenous fertilizer, or you can mix urease inhibitors can be added to make them slow, or nitrification inhibitors can be added to make a fertilizer slow. So there are different techniques to make the slow release of nitrogenous fertilizer. So in this direction, urea forms were developed in Germany, and the urea form 30 or something like that, they were patented for use in fertilizer in 1947 in USA. So there are number of urea forms. IBDU also slow release fertilizer. Sulfur coated urea is worth mentioning. It was first time synthesized by TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority in USA. Sulfur coated urea, and now people have renewed interest in sulfur coated urea because it supplies sulfur as well as it makes urea as a slow releasing fertilizer, and also improves the nitrogen use efficiency as well as sulfur use efficiency. So NPK fertilizer coated with sulfur have also been developed, not just urea. Now NPK fertilizers are also being coated with sulfur in Japan. Sulfur coated urea and several other sulfur coated fertilizers are estimated to account for about 45% of total coated fertilizer production. So the sulfur coated urea is more important among the coated fertilizer. So far India is concerned, slow release fertilizers can increase the efficiency of nitrogen. Why we are producing them? They can increase the efficiency of fertilizer nitrogen by 10 to 20%, which is any case is substantial. And neem oil coated urea, whether produced in India or imported, I think you know it. Whole urea, whatever urea is there in India, whether it is self-produced or brought from other countries, has to be neem coated, and since 1st January 2016. So it is compulsory. And if you want to know more on neem coated urea, you can see this article on neem coated urea. So it finishes the history of soil fertility and fertilizer. It was definitely a little bit boring, maybe boring for you, but it is important. History is important because for you it is in simple form, this history, but it has no end. This history has no end. So if you have questions on history of soil fertility or fertilizer, before I move to the next topic, you can unmute your mic and ask questions. Hello, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So please ask any question if you have in mind related to slow release fertilizer, related to anything. So friends, there is not much, if not much to ask, and you can keep your question. We can discuss at the end of this also. So the third and last and most important part of today's lecture is organic plant nutrition. Organic plant nutrition, why I am taking it? Because it may be a new subject to you. Many of you may not be aware about this subject, and this is also in these days people have some interest in organic plant nutrition also. So I will explain it in detail. But before we move further, I have a question to you. See, in areas which are temperate area where temperatures are very, very low. You take example of hilly area in India. Also, we have hilly area where temperatures are very low. Go to Himalaya, go to Kashmir, and you will find very kind of temperate climate. And you go to Europe, go to America, go to some many temperate countries. So what you will find two very striking things. One is that the trees are very tall, and trees are very, very heavy trunk is there in those trees, in temperate trees, and they are very, very tall also, if you have seen in movies, pictures. And second point is, besides trees or forest, you will also find grasslands there. Okay, grasslands are there, big grasslands are there, where you will find cows and sheep are grazing there, and forest. So, and also on the other hand, the decomposition rate of nutrient organic matter are very, very slow. You are aware that temperate soils contain very high levels of organic matter. And high levels of organic matter means the CN ratio is very wide. If the CN ratio is very wide, then nitrogen, free nitrogen or mineralized nitrogen may be very small. And because of high temperature and greater CN ratio, immobilization will be more than the mineralization. So my question is, how plants or forest or grasslands are surviving there without getting adequate decomposition of organic material? And also in natural system, in forest areas, they are not using any inorganic or chemical fertilizer also. So how come that vegetation is surviving? This is the question. If anyone has idea, please come forward. You got temperate vegetation, the mineral nitrogen is very small in the soil, very insignificant in the soil, because CN ratio is very wide and temperatures are also very low. So under these conditions, how these plants are surviving? That is the question. Any answer? If you do not have, yes, please, somebody has come.
No, sir, I don't.
Okay. If you have no answer, then see this presentation. You will get answer at the end of this presentation or in the middle. You will get the answer to this question. That is why.
Not audible.
Not audible, sir.
Not coming.
So at the end, you will get, or in the middle, you will get answer to this question. Why the vegetation is very high and still mineral nitrogen is not there. So we have two kind of plant nutrition. One is that they can take the mineral nutrition. They can take the nutrients in mineral form or ionic form. And other is organic nutrition. That molecular form of nutrients, when the nutrients are in molecular form, they can be absorbed. That is the difference in mineral and organic nutrition. But as on today, most of the soil scientists or soil sciences student will say that it is only mineral nutrition which is possible. They will not agree that organic nutrition is also possible. They will not agree that plants can take up nutrients in organic form also. Organic form here means in the molecular form. So you can see this is the case where you have 17 essential elements, and out of 17, your 14 are mineral elements. So these mineral elements are taken up in ionic form. All are taken up in ionic form. Some are cation, some are anion, some has +1 charge, some has +3, -3, and so on. But what about boric acid? Boron. So boron is mainly absorbed in acid form. Boric acid is directly absorbed by the plants. So major part of major part of boron is absorbed by plants in the form of boric acid, H3BO3 or BOS3. So nobody can question it. I have seen several textbooks, several research papers where it has been written that boron is removed by the plants in boric acid form. It is not absorbed in ionic forms. You can recheck it. So if one element can be absorbed in molecular form, why not others? That is the question. Now you see this is the Bible of soil science. I take it a Bible of soil science, nature and properties of soils. So it has talked about dissolved organic nitrogen. Dissolved organic nitrogen is you see organic nitrogen. It means there is a nitrogen which is dissolved, which is soluble in water, which is easily soluble in water, which can be easily part of the soil solution. So there are two kinds of nitrogen. One is dissolved organic nitrogen, other is soluble organic nitrogen. So first we can see the difference between DON and SON, dissolved organic nitrogen and soluble organic nitrogen. So content in the next slide have been taken from Brady's book. From the same book, I made the next slides. So you can see, if you want to read more, if you want to confirm it, you can go to two review papers. First is Nature Significance and Analysis of SON for Agricultural Soil. Means it is there in agricultural soil, our agro ecosystems, where we are artificially doing farming. In those systems also, SON and DON are there, and they are contributing to the nutrition of the plants. Other is, if you want to see its role in natural ecosystem or forest ecosystem, you can go to the review number 2. So these are the reviews which confirm that plants can take up nitrogen in organic forms. So what is dissolved organic nitrogen? Modern analytical tools have shown conclusively means there is no doubt that plant uptake and leaching losses in both natural and agroecosystem involve nitrogen containing organic compounds. Means plant uptake is there and leaching losses are also there of the organic nitrogenous compounds. These compounds either actually exist dissolved in the soil solution. If such soluble nitrogen compounds are dissolved in soil solution, then they are called as, it is called as dissolved organic nitrogen. It is called as dissolved organic nitrogen, or can be easily extracted from the soils, from the water. Water can be used as an extractant or mild salt solution. Or general salt solution can be used to extract the soluble organic nitrogen. So DON is a fraction of SON. DON is a fraction of SON, which is there in the soil solution. And SON means soluble organic nitrogen, which can be easily extracted from the soil. So you can see the proportion of different organic nitrogen in the soil. So this picture is from Brady's book. So you can see the quantity of total organic nitrogen. Total organic nitrogen is too much proportion of total organic nitrogen. And you can see next is SON, soluble organic nitrogen. And next is DON. DON is dissolved organic nitrogen. So these SON and DON are the soluble forms of organic nitrogen. And you can see their relative size. So DON is a portion of the SON. The DON generally accounts for between 0.1 to 3% of the total N in soils, a pool size similar to mineral nitrogen. This point must be underlined. Pool size equal to mineral nitrogen. Your mineral nitrogen is ammonical nitrogen, nitrate nitrogen, which is preferred by the plants, but equal to this is the size of the soluble organic nitrogen. Where organic manures are used, this is a very interesting point. Where organic manures are used in arable soils, cultivated soils, or our agroecosystem, or grasslands, DON contents are often considerably higher than those of mineral nitrogen. Sometimes pool of DON can be higher than the mineral nitrogen. The nitrogen mobilized from litter of some forest species have DON is to inorganic nitrogen ratio of 10:1. I think now you got the answer of that question. So under temperate conditions in grasslands, in those areas, you do not have much of the mineral nitrogen. Actually, in those conditions, you have SON, soluble organic nitrogen, or DON. So therefore, plants are surviving under those conditions by using SON or DON. DON is more available than SON, so they use DON. And you can see the ratio of DON to mineral nitrogen or inorganic nitrogen can be as high as 10:1. So under those conditions, this organic nitrogen is available and plants are surviving by using this organic form of nitrogen. So evidences have come up. So, and it is also proved that this nitrogen, SON, is removed by the crops or removed by the plants. So in nitrogen limited ecosystem, where you do not have sufficient mineral nitrogen, is maybe under strongly acidic conditions or infertile soils or organic soils. Under such kind of conditions where mineral nitrogen is very limited, DON may be the primary source of absorbed nitrogen. So it has been proved that organic nitrogen can be taken up by the plants. This helps explain the fact that plant growth in forest species is considerably greater, although inorganic nitrogen is limited. Now question comes, what are the chemicals which are actually absorbed by the plants? So these are the low molecular weight compounds like amino acids may be taken up directly from the plant roots. And where from this amino acid is coming? It is coming from aminization of the organic material. These amino acids are coming. If they are to be converted into ammonical form and nitrate form and so on, then it will take a lot of time. And if plants are hungry, they cannot wait let the first finish the process of nitrification, ammonification. Then I will take nitrate. If they feel hunger, they can take up the amino acid directly. So low molecular weight amino acids, amino sugars are the compounds that are absorbed by the plant. Low molecular weight DON compounds can be transported into microbial cells for direct assimilation. So there are competition. There is competition between microbes as well as plants. Plant root and microbes, they compete for SON, soluble organic nitrogen, or DON. They compete with each other. Like microbes also take up inorganic nitrogen. So now they can also take up the organic nitrogen and they make a part of their body. However, later they will release it back into the soil. So once inside the microbial cell, enzyme decompose these DON compounds and the nitrogen is used to make proteins in their body, body of the microbes. If the nitrogen from DON exceeds the immediate need of the cell, cell means microbial cell, the excess will be released back into the soil solution. So these microbes will release excess nitrogen back into the soil solution. Microbial uptake of both DON and mineral nitrogen take place concurrently in soil. So both can happen. Microbes can take up mineral nitrogen and they can also take up the DON. So variety of competition is there. Direct competition between plants and microbes for both forms of nitrogen. This is happening. Now, not just uptake, the leaching losses also occur same way as in case of mineral nitrogen or inorganic nitrogen. DON may be lost by leaching, typically 30 to 60% of the all leached nitrogen, total leached nitrogen from dairy farm or beef feed loads. It can go as high as, means this DON or SON also susceptible to leaching. In fact, DON comprises about 25% of the nitrogen carried by the Mississippi River. They are also polluting the river, eutrophication. Up till now we knew that it is the inorganic nitrogen, mineral nitrogen, which is contributing, or phosphorus, inorganic phosphorus. Now this organic nitrogen has also become a problem. Problem for river, means river pollution can happen, or sea pollution, or it can lead to eutrophication. So thus DON likely contribute to the environmental problems downstream. Downstream means at the end where water is collected. So in this picture, again from the same source. So now SON is the part of nitrogen cycle. They have very prominently included in it. So you can study this nitrogen cycle picture from the book or from here, and you can find somewhere soluble organic nitrogen also. I cannot show you, I don't know how to show it by arrow. So here at this particular I don't know. So you can find on the right bottom right corner. Just see on the bottom right corner, soluble organic nitrogen leaching loss. You can see soluble organic nitrogen on the bottom right corner. So you will see soluble organic nitrogen, and it is also going for leaching loss. And you can see green line. It is going for plant uptake also, and it is also going for mineralization, and it can also go for erosion and runoff losses. You can see. So just have your interpretation of this picture. You can confirm it. Now, as already discussed, that it has some chemical nature, organic nature. So what actually these compounds are, which are removed by the plants or taken up by the plants in organic forms. So chemical constituent of DON originate from microbial and root exudates. Where from these materials are coming? These materials may come from microbes. They can come from root exudates. They can come from litter leachates in forest areas, or they can come from decomposition of organic material. So these are the sources of DON. Compounds are both hydrophilic and hydrophobic. This DON includes your hydrophilic as well as hydrophobic compounds. Some may be able to interact with inorganic colloids. They can improve the soil properties also, but others would react with soil organic matter. 1/3 DON is in the form of amino acid. Most of the DON is in amino sugar or amino acids. More research needed to further ascertain the compounds that make up DON. So people are still identifying that what are the organic constituents which are part of DON. So it is research is underway, and to see more references, more literature on this subject which support that organic nutrition of nitrogen happens in the nature. So this is a paper, past, present, and future of organic nutrients. So plants, they consider plants as mixotrophs. Mixotrophs means they can take up nitrogen here in organic form as well as in inorganic form, with an inherent ability to use organic nutrients via direct uptake or aided by exoenzyme mediated degradation. So this is a paper in Plant and Soil. And you can see in this paper, I found this picture. So this picture explains you how plants are taking up the organic nitrogen. So you can see on the top of it, plant, green plant. And on the left, you see soil organic matter. The soil organic matter can come from the plant roots. It can come from the plant manures or variety of things. You know how this soil organic matter, there are different sources of soil organic matter. And when the decomposition starts, series of products are formed, series of reactions happen or conversions happen. So first it will be converted into polymers, polymerization, proteins, peptides. They can be converted into oligomers, monomers, and then ammonification, then nitrification. So you can see this is whole process of decomposition of organic material or mineralization of organic material. So you can see in this picture, they have proved that polymers can be absorbed directly, these proteins, peptides, oligomers can be absorbed, monomers can, I don't understand the difference between these three. Maybe soil science students understand better what are polymers, oligomers, monomers. So all these forms can be absorbed by the plants. But one thing is interesting, that the preference, definitely preference of the plants will go to nitrate. First preference of the plants will go to nitrate, second will go to ammonium. But if you do not have sufficient nitrate and ammonium, then it will go to amino acids and then so on. So it is like this. So this, friends, this is the experiment done in 1911. 1911 by by some scientists. This experiment was done. Hutchinson and Miller, they did on pea plants, mutter pea plants. They did it under axenic solution. Axenic solution means it is free from microbes, a state of a culture in which only a single species, variety or strain of a living thing can live or can survive. Means there are no infections, no foreign materials in this. Only one plant, or that is your pea plant, can survive. There are no microbes in this. So microbes, they kept it axenic because they cannot convert the organic nitrogen into inorganic nitrogen. Just for this safety, they made axenic conditions. And first source was ammonium sulfate, urea, acetamide, guanidine, nitrogen aspartate, peptone, etc. So first two sources are inorganic sources of nitrogen, and rest sources are organic sources of nitrogen. So in both the cases, in inorganic source or organic source, plants survived. They made growth. Of course, growth was variable. For example, in urea, the growth was more, and in next best growth maybe in acetamide. So you can compare acetamide and urea. Means if you apply just acetamide, which cannot be converted into nitrate because there are no microbes, plant is still survived. That means plant can remove acetamide. Plant can take up. Many of you must have heard that plant also take up nutrients in urea form. They can absorb nitrogen in urea form also. There are reports. So this experiment proved that organic nutrition can happen. Another experiment, this experiment also proved that in left side you have inorganic nitrogen, right side you have organic nitrogen. So in both cases, plants survived. This experiment was Flagg 1965. He made some isotopic studies to prove the point that plant can survive under organic nutrition, organic compound. You need not to go into the more details of this subject or this experiment. Just this experiment is proving that plant can take up organic compounds directly by their roots. And this is very scientific review, soluble organic nitrogen in agricultural soil. This is SON and written by Murphy. He is very famous scientist from USA, D.V. Murphy. So you can see different columns. In the first column, you see different soil groups. And these are the name of the soil groups. They are classification of the soil groups. And these are the textures of the soil. And these are the cropping systems. And then you have bulk density. And then just see the last two columns. Last two columns are important, mineral nitrogen and SON. So you see across all the soil groups, across all the soil textures, across all the cropping system, across all the bulk density of soils, you see the equal quantity of mineral and soluble organic nitrogen in last two columns. See the first row, it is 26 mineral nitrogen, 29 is the soluble organic nitrogen. Almost same ratio means they are equal. Mineral nitrogen and soluble organic nitrogen are in equal proportion under all the variable conditions of your soil group, texture or cropping system. So they are in equal amount also in natural system as well as in agro ecosystem. So the soluble organic nitrogen is very, very important. We need to manage it. The management of soluble organic nitrogen will become, not now, maybe someday it will become important. And see another case by the same author. You can see the mineral nitrogens, or you can try yourself to understand this this slide. You can do interpretation of this slide. Try to get the meaning. Those who are interested can understand it. And then this is a text from Murphy in the same review paper. They are saying that the release of nitrogen through mineralization of SOM and plant residues has long been identified as an important source of plant uptake. Plants are usually thought to take up ammonium nitrate, nitrogen. Plants are able to take up urea directly in the absence of hydrolysis. but more slowly than the mineral nitrogen. Bollard demonstrated that many plants are able to use SON compounds as their sole nitrogen source. This may be underlined. Bollard demonstrated that many plants are able to use SON compounds as their sole nitrogen source. In some natural environments, like temperate and Arctic heatlands, mineralization rates are too slow to supply all of nitrogen required. So these are very important points. You may try to read those points. If you today or tomorrow, if you speak to your scientists in the soil science division, very few scientists will agree to it. Many of them will not agree to it. Actually, what happened, most of the time, the soil scientists say,
Sir, not audible.
Sir, not
Sir,
audible.
not audible.
okay.
They're not
Is it-
audible, sir.
Is it okay now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So,
Yes.
so many of the scientists
Yes,
who are
sir.
not okay, many of the soil scientists or scientists who are not aware
Yes,
about the
sir.
soil. Okay, many of the scientists who are not aware of the this concept, they will not believe. They will say that Dinesh Kumar is speaking false things. So many times it can also happen, friends. So if the person at the other end is not knowing a fact, he may consider that you are wrong. So if you go to soil science, talk to your teacher, they will laugh at you. So I don't know how to say it, but they will not believe it. That's why I started from the Brady book, that at least people will trust this book. So there are some more papers, interesting papers on this subject, which support the view. Breaks in the cycle, dissolved organic nitrogen in terrestrial ecosystem. This review came in 2003. So same views are supported by this review also. So the summary of this review is, DON is found in almost every terrestrial and aquatic system. DON can be a short circuit, because just few slides back you have seen a picture where organic matter was decomposing into polymers, oligomers, monomers, ammonium nitrate, and so on. So in that case, you have seen if plant is not, if the decomposition is not completing up to nitrate, then the intermediate compound will be absorbed, and this is a short circuit of nutrient uptake. So short circuit in the terrestrial nitrogen cycle, when plants take up some organic form of nitrogen directly from solution without the need of microbial decomposition or mineralization. DON can leak, leaching can happen, and DON contains multiple form of organic nitrogen. It is not one source. There are many sources, many organic sources. So friends, you can see in the right picture a short circuit. Soil organic matter or plant roots or your litter can give you DON into soil solution, and this can be directly taken up by the plant root. You can see the arrow. Soil organic matter is written, and where DON is also there below this. And DON and soil organic matter have balance, means if they are in balance, and then DON can be absorbed by the plant roots. However, the long processes that SOM is acted upon by microbes, then ammonium is formed, nitrate is formed, and this can be absorbed by the plant. So there are two routes. There are two lines or two routes to plant uptake. One is SON, DON, or other is mineral route. So try to understand the picture, what this picture is saying. And friends, there are many paper. Today, it may be just your homework. I initiated the discussion. Just you type soluble organic nitrogen in Google or in Science Direct, or you type in your anywhere you can search dissolved organic nitrogen or soluble organic nitrogen. Now I hope that you are able to understand what is the difference between dissolved organic nitrogen and soluble organic nitrogen. Dissolved organic nitrogen is part of soluble organic nitrogen, which is there in the soil solution. And soluble organic nitrogen is not in soil solution, but it can be easily or very quickly converted into DON once the the pool of DON is reducing in the soil solution, this SO1 can release it into the soil solution. So they are in equilibrium, and soluble organic nitrogen is quickly released. It can be easily extracted by water from the soil, or it can be easily extracted by mild salt solution. So this is difference between a DON and SON. But many times people take them synonymous also. You will find that some people are using SON and some people are using DON. So they can be used interchangeably also. Okay. But some people make a difference between these two. If you make difference, you know what is the difference. So this is very interesting part of today's lecture. And now you are free to ask your questions. Should I stop the recording first?